Hey y'all, so we are back for episode 3. Super excited. So listen, let me just warn y'all. I feel like we've been warning in episode 1 and 2, but episode 3 might get a little bit real. We are going to be diving into an experience that is very relevant for all of us, but we'll get to that in a second. First, what we want to talk about is, so we've established that we are all therapists or therapist interns. And so we wanted you guys to kind of get a feel of what our daily life is like, right? So we walk in to our offices or on our computers, and we greet our therapist. And there's usually like a check-in question that we start with in order to kind of gauge where they're at for today and get ourselves going. So these are questions that we'll ask in hopes that you will ask yourself this question, but we're also going to check in with each other and kind of talking about, whatever it is that comes up. So question for you guys today, what emotion have you felt most often this week? Like, what is the thing that has come up on a regular basis for you?
Most definitely the feeling or the emotion of being overwhelmed. I'm just going to leave it there.
Yeah. And for me, I think my word would be unfocused.
Yeah. I think it feels like we've been in similar realms this week. My word would be pressured. I've definitely felt a bit of overwhelm and unfocused and like scatterbrained and trying to get myself together to do all the things, but also a lot of pressure. What we talked about in earlier episodes is the fact that we are not just students. We hold multiple roles, right? So we are doing things on campus, and we are therapists, and we are students, and in some spaces we are connecting with students on different levels and supervising and those kinds of things. And so we hold a lot of different roles. And for me, all of those roles for this week are demanding a lot of me. And so it definitely feels like pressure. But I guess in a beautiful but really sad way, it ties into a lot of what we'll be talking about today, which is imposter syndrome. And so the kind of the overflowing feeling in the midst of being in separate contexts and having multiple responsibilities demanded of you. And I guess this feeling of the fact that, like, how am I going to make this work? How do I really fit into the rooms and fill the responsibilities and the shoes that I'm expected to when I don't even know that I can? Like, I don't know that I'm able to do that efficiently.
So by definition, imposter syndrome refers to an internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you to be. So oftentimes one may feel like a fraud in the room, or may feel like I don't fit in alignment here. It kind of is that very awkward.
Girl, that fraud word is so real.
Yeah.
The feeling of feeling like a fraud, so real.
Yes. And I think in the midst of that too, we should define competency, since it revolves around a lot. It revolves around that a lot. So competency is defined as the ability to do something successfully or efficiently. Should I go ahead and chime in with this?
Sure, yeah.
Take this one away.
I don't know about away, but we'll try something. So this past year for me, Dunica's laughing at my posture. So this past year for me, I started what I would kind of call my first big girl job at an agency where most of the other clinicians in the center are LPCs, which are different in their framework and how they approach things versus MFTs, marriage and family therapists. So licensed professional counselors versus marriage and family therapists. Marriage and family therapists typically take a more systemic, holistic approach to doing therapy. LPCs kind of take a more diagnostic approach in their work as well. So in me approaching this job and the conversations that we've had, I would sometimes begin to question myself and begin to question my engagement with the concept of competency because I recognized that my lens was different, and I struggled with the fact that, these people who I work with have been in the career as long as, I've kind of been alive. And if I'm being quite honest. They've been in this field for as long as I've been alive. I'm just developing in this journey, and so I questioned a lot, like in my interview, like what is it that I actually have to offer to these people? As I'm coming in as an MFT that is of a different lens, and then as I am developing as well, like age wise and my experiences, I questioned my offering. What is it that I can do? And so oftentimes in the room, I would feel like a fraud because sometimes my concept or the way that I saw things didn't necessarily fall in alignment with others. So I had an expectation of myself to be in alignment with what was generally the consensus in the room. But we'll talk a little bit more about how I had to reassure myself of what that looked like in future episodes. But generally speaking, that's the beginning of that journey for me. And then the PhD program started for me last semester. Child, I was sitting in the classrooms and I was struggling with finding my voice in these spaces because there was a sense of responsibility that I felt like I needed, that was now moving up in the educational realm for me, in my voice that I needed to have, in my knowledge base, as I was in the room with other clinicians who were also much older than me and who had also been in the game a little longer than me as well. I wondered, am I just a fraud here? Should I even be here?
Yes.
Is someone like pranking me? How on earth did I make it to a PhD program? Are the kinds of questions that kind of came up in my mind, and it impacted me a lot in being able to find my voice in the classroom. It impacted my thought process because I didn't see myself as being competent to have the ability to be here and to be able to do and fulfill the educational path that I wanted to. So that's kind of like what my journey and my experiences look like thus far with regard to starting a new job with much more that required much more experience of me, or required a different level of professionalism from me, as well as starting a PhD program. So yeah.
Yeah, as we were talking, I started thinking, because, okay, first, I definitely relate on multiple levels. I said to a professor a couple of days ago that I realized that maybe imposter syndrome will just be my lifelong friend that will be here with me for the journey, because it's just in every space. It's concerning the PhD, it's concerning private practice, and even before getting the PhD, like when I first started seeing clients, I was like, oh my gosh, who let me in a room with people and trusted me to say things to them that can help their life? Who in the
and
world?
their right mind
Gave me permission and approval to sit in a room with other people with whom, like, I have not walked their journey specifically. Galisa, you highlight something though that brought a question to mind, or a question and a thought. You said, I was trying to measure up to these people on the job who had potentially been working for as long or longer than I've been alive. And I paused and I was like, Danielle, why in the world would we do that? Like, why in the world would I sit and compare myself to people who rightfully have been in this for longer than I have been alive? And so why would I then expect myself to be at the same level or capacity that they are? And I think at the basis of what imposter syndrome is, for me at least, it is expectation, right? It is the expectation that I feel like I should be at a certain level. I feel like I should be able to measure up to whatever the standard is. And who creates the standard? We do. It is not like and being welcomed into these spaces and being, for me, accepted into the PhD program, right? Someone saw fit that I am educated enough, responsible enough, etc., to pursue a PhD degree. I got into the classes and set a whole different standard based on who was in the room and their level of expertise in different things and their level of work experience, and decided within my mind, obviously not intentionally, but decided within my mind that I don't measure up. And what about this? Like, why should I set an expectation that essentially I am not going to meet necessarily, because the truth of the matter is you have more experience, but also an expectation that is higher potentially than the people who allowed me into this space. If I've been allowed into the room, there's got to be something that I have to offer. If I was enrolled or accepted into the PhD program, there is something that is seen by people who have worked in the field for a long time that I am able to benefit and meet the standards, meet the requirements, and fulfill them to graduate with a degree. And for some reason, we now see ourselves as being lesser while someone else is deeming us to be enough.
Well, let me just tell y'all how imposter syndrome gripped me, right?
It gripped me.
Because last semester was my first semester in the MFT program. And I remember my first 2 days of classes, checking the schedule. 1, to make sure obviously I was in the right class. But 2, to make sure that my name was on the right roster. I kept checking constantly because I was like, you know what? Looking around me, I'm like, I don't know if I really belong here. I really was allowing that whole idea of imposter syndrome to just steal my joy of being in a classroom where I was like, I actually made it here. Like I was accepted into this program and I made it here. And so I'm excited that I was able to be a part of that process, and excitement came later. But imposter syndrome really had me for the first 2 days where I was like, I had to keep looking around.
You just said a statement that you were excited, but in the midst of the process, like, it took a while to get there. And I'm thinking about the way that imposter syndrome even potentially steals our level of joy and gratefulness in the midst of the process, even if for a while, because we're not able to embrace, like, oh, I'm fully grateful to be in this program, or I'm fully grateful to be at the table, because I'm so frightened about being at the table and afraid that I will mess up while being at the table. We're not able to sit in the fullness of, like, wow, I made it. Like, this is something that I've worked for, I've earned it. And so we stay in a place of holding a lot of anxiety and not being able to fully relax and allow ourselves to embrace the fullness of what the process looks like.
That's well said. That is exactly how I felt. That was a lot. It was the process of a lot of anxiety just sitting in the room. But the beautiful thing was that I was able to get past that. I was able to get to a point where I was like, one, my voice is warranted and needed. There's a reason that I'm here. And so that was, I think, the process for me, that in growing pains, I had to get out of that thought of maybe I don't belong in here, and get into the space of I belong here, and this is a beautiful process, and I could accept and be happy to be in this space.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of significance in recognizing the impact that the experience of imposter syndrome has on us. As we see ourselves in conjunction with other people, we reflect on comparison. We reflect on this idea of the emotional exchange that happens, where it kind of defeats and steals away our joy in different aspects. But I also think about how it affects our passions and how it impacts what our vision is for ourselves, and how we want to ultimately create some element of purpose for ourselves, but also purpose in alignment, as we've talked about in previous episodes, about also creating space for other people. I think about the impact of, if I consistently stay in the space of constantly feeling like I am not competent enough, how much that's also defeating my opportunity to be able to create space for other people as well, where they can feel that way, because I'm constantly in this headspace of, I'm not supposed to be in this space, I'm not supposed to be in this room. And so I wonder too how much we as we kind of go back to the drawing board, as well as women of color, and also as coming from Caribbean descent, how much we can also use this, what feels like it's kind of draining us and taking away from us, how we can use this to open up more elements of understanding for ourselves, and learning to accept a lot of the things that we might be fighting ourselves against. A lot of the friction that we might be that might be caused because of expectations, where acceptance can become a part of that conversation as well, especially as we think about the impact that comes out of our healing, essentially, of how we perceive ourselves.
Yeah, you talk about acceptance, and I think that's the place that I hit the other day. As I mentioned in saying to my professor that I think imposter syndrome will just be a lifelong friend of mine, right? Acknowledging that maybe this is a growing pain, that for as long as I'm growing, this thing will be here. And it doesn't mean that I'm any less worthy or any less significant in the room. But, like, maybe this is just a necessary pain in the process. And looking at things like childbirth, right? Like, there's necessary pain in order to bring, like, beautiful life into the world. And so in identifying, like, okay, imposter syndrome is not fun. it is not exciting, but generally, generally it's a thing that really pushes us to a different place in recognizing like what is really in us and almost putting that pressure for what is in us to come out, right? And
sure.
so there is maybe there's a beauty in this. I think the beauty is maybe the beauty is in the fact that this keeps us on our toes enough to show up in our best ways, right? If I get too relaxed in the room, is it possible that I will miss out on an opportunity versus the ability to really stand fully in it for as long as I am concerned about it? I think our concern about being an imposter pushes us to our best potential most times if we lean this in the correct direction in a way that allows us to excel even more than we would have without it. That thought just came to mind.
Yeah.
So would you guys say like this going through this like stages of imposter syndrome is a humbling experience once we don't stay there? I think to feel it a little bit and just be like and recognize it, but once we don't stay in that place, I think it could be humbling.
Yeah, I agree with that, and thinking that it is a humbling experience. And I was having a conversation with one of our professors the other day, and just kind of describing to him all of the things that are wrestling on in my mind that just influence imposter syndrome. And he kind of like pitched it in a way where the internal workings that we have going on that might be causing us to feel incompetent, it could also be reframed or it can become an experience of building strategy so that we are developing a sense of growth out of something that feels painful and that feels very tiresome. We can use this as an experience now of strategy to better understand ourselves, better understand our passions, better invest and nurture the qualities that help us to be the best versions of ourselves. So, just looking at opportunity in the midst of what feels painful and gruesome and tedious, I think is helpful in this experience as well.
I think especially in recognizing, number one, that it can be a strength, but number two, that imposter syndrome is one of those things that only exists in me, right? Oftentimes when I am in the room, no one else is really questioning why I'm in the room.
For real.
Right? Everyone is like, wow, you have so much to bring to the table. You're so articulate, blah, blah, blah. You have great things to say. We want and need your voice in the room. And we within ourselves are doubting the truth of what they're saying and doubting ourselves and our ability to stay in there. I remember the first day of my PhD program, we all came in and we're getting to know each other and all those things. And we went through all the classes, and at the end of the classes, we had a meeting. And the director of the program stood in front of us and basically asked, like, how are you guys feeling? And by the time we went around the room, we all agreed, all 12 of us, 12 of us, agreed that what we were feeling was imposter syndrome. And I remember it being a very freeing thing to be like, the person I am looking at and measuring myself up to feels exactly the same way that I do in being in this program. The person who has established an agency and been running it for the last 15-ish years or so. The person who just graduated and from the master's and started this program. The person who came out of a different field of work and is starting this afresh. Like, we all are starting on the same playing field of all feeling like imposters. And so that, I think for me, is what helped me to know that, like, it is an okay place to be. Not the greatest feeling, but it's an okay place to be because it helps to develop us, right? There is a purpose in this, and I'm not feeling this just because, but there's a purpose, and that maybe it gets to, it gets to exist. It gets to exist in the fact that people from different backgrounds are all feeling this, and potentially can be a uniting thing that helps to propel us to another level together, as opposed to being a thing that I find to be divisive as I compare myself to my colleagues.
I think one of the biggest things for me when I explore this whole idea of imposter syndrome even more, I'm facing myself a little bit when I realize that the self expectations I've been putting on myself and all of the thoughts and ideas that I have towards myself, I'm really facing myself through this whole process and the things that I think about me. And so I guess it's freeing in a sense when I realize, like, I don't have to think this way. This isn't necessarily the truth about myself. I could still be humbled through this process as well. So
Yeah, I can still evolve, and I can still allow myself to be a part of the experience without having to question it
Right.
all of the time.
Right.
I think about this in conjunction. So I call myself sometimes a recovering perfectionist. Why are you agreeing so hard?
Sorry.
I call myself a recovering perfectionist because I admit I have my tendencies where I have a hard time accepting the limitations that exist. And that's why when you said earlier about the idea of humbling, of this being a humbling experience, I find that to be an evident part of this journey of ridding myself of those expectations that are in my brain designed to try to perfect something, and just simply have kind of aligned myself with a perspective of wanting to put my best foot forward instead, and recognizing that everyone around me is going through the same journey in different ways. And so as Danielle kind of made mention of like the classroom and recognizing like you're experiencing what I'm kind of looking at you and comparing like the same kind of vibe, I think it's been liberating in some experiences as well as I'm trying to rid myself of these perfectionist tendencies, recognizing that we're all trying to figure this thing called life out at the same time. And so this whole definition or concept of competency and this ability is something that is continuously evolving. We're continuously defining what competency looks like in a particular aspect of our lives, simply because our experiences and our understanding of ourselves, our understanding of our abilities are also evolving in some ways. Some things will remain constant, but some things will evolve. And so what I perceive as being successful or sufficient in a certain season of life might change.
And we all have different expectations.
Yeah.
Of ourselves.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. I think at the basis level of these questions, what we're asking is like, am I doing this well? Am I doing this right? And like, how do I get to, or how do I meet, I guess, my own personal expectations that I've set for myself? I've had conversations with people recently who, we're talking about imposter syndrome in professional and academic spaces, but there's even, I think, an aspect of imposter syndrome with adulting that often is at play. And so I know, for example, in our like time of life, questioning like, when am I like the full adult in the room? And like, obviously we're adults, right? But we're so used to.
Am I though? Am I just a fraud?
All right, let me free y'all. We're grown, okay? Grown, graduated, no kids. We are grown, okay? But at the same time, like recognizing, even in having conversations with people, in their 30s and 40s, of like, I think for many of us, or for me, I was waiting on a time to feel like an adult. Like,
yeah.
I feel it today, and like it is official. And recognizing that in these spaces, again, it's based on an expectation of when I was younger, looking at adults and what they looked like, right? And so when I was 5, 10, and looked at people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, they looked like they had it all together. And so again, in the space that I'm sitting in and feeling like an imposter, I feel like I should have it all together. Whatever it is, finances, relationship, job, education, I should have it all together because I am an adult.
Right.
And so recognizing, again, with all people, that we sit in different places, right? Everyone is adulting in a very different way. There are some people who have all of these things kind of handled well. There are some who, honestly, some people's lives are like, not the best relationally, but they're thriving in their education and profession, or vice versa. Like they may not know what job they want and they're just working a job to make money, but their relationships are flourishing, right? And so when do we get to call ourselves adults? When do I get to sit in the room of adults metaphorically and know that I line up and that I measure up? And I think maybe there's more of an acceptance of like, this is where I am on my journey, and we all fit the definition, right? In the PhD room, I may not be at the same place experientially as everyone else, but we all fit the definition of what it is to be a PhD student because we all belong.
Right.
And so in all of these growing pains, doing the best that we can to look like the thing that we don't know what it looks like. We are striving to be a thing that has no prototype. Well, like there's no one fit thing.
No.
And even more so, as we talked about in the last episode, we are one of the first or one of few, and trying to figure out, again, on an extra layer, what does that look like? Because there literally is no prototype. And so imposter syndrome is is a lot more frequent in those spaces. But, on a day-by-day basis, we do the best that we can. And I think in ways that we have built community with each other, this kind of helps to navigate through those ways, and knowing that, like, I am wondering a thing, or I'm sitting in a class and having a question about something, and I may like text Gay Lisa, and Gay Lisa's thinking the same thing at the same time. And so knowing that there are people who sit in the same spaces, and the gift is that we get to navigate these spaces together.
Beautifully said.
So y'all, it's been a real journey. And it's kind of talking about what our different experiences of look like. And Danielle, in that last part of it is kind of brought in, even in a age kind of context, what imposter syndrome looks like and how that affects our perception of like adulting.
I still have to call my mommy sometime and
Yeah,
ask her.
there's nothing wrong with that.
Like,
call your mommy.
should I buy this?
Right?
Listen, okay, it's real.
Mommy knows.
I was talking to somebody the other day and about this adulting thing. And like we were talking about the fact that like things may happen in the world and we're still like, okay, who do I call?
Literally.
Like, who do I call? And then it's like, no, I don't get to call anybody. I am the person. Like, I am the adult that I call to the situation. You know, when we're young, we're like, oh, find an adult and let them handle it. I am now the adult. I am now the person that is responsible.
When the money gone, the money gone.
And there's nobody to call.
Nobody.
I am the one who needs to show up for me.
You need to find the money.
Yes.
Oh man, this is ghetto.
Yeah. And so, ghetto it is. Yeah, there are a lot of nuances to this, as you said, Gay Lisa, but I think the beautiful thing is that we are yet in the process. This is a growing pain, I think, that does not just dissipate. Like I said, it's my lifelong friend. And so when I start another thing, whatever the thing is, when I'm allowed into another space, it's something that I expect will probably show up, but I get to embrace it because I know that it's bringing me some level of change, and I know that I'm not the only one in the room feeling it. So hopefully this has been a topic for you all that you also are able to identify with. I'm sure that whatever your spaces are, and whatever your fields of work are, that you're able to hold to or relate to this experience in some way. And hopefully this has brought you some level of normalcy in realizing that it is not just you, it is not just something in your mind, but it's something that people on several levels are dealing with. Yeah.
Just as like some reflection questions, I think that may be helpful if you might be resonating in different ways with our stories or our journeys, or just wondering if you might have imposter syndrome. Here's some questions to ask yourself. Do you agonize over even the smallest mistakes or flaws in your work? Do you attribute your success to luck or outside factors? Are you very sensitive to even constructive criticism?
Yes.
Okay. Do you feel like you will inevitably be found out as a phony? Do you downplay your own expertise, even in areas where you are genuinely more skilled than others?
Absolutely. That's crazy. That's my life. I don't know if I know the question, but that one there, that's my life.
Yeah, these are some questions to kind of reflect on. And you know, causes of this, some of these things, they may come from family upbringing, just your own personality and how you embrace and engage yourself, new work, transitionary with new work or school opportunities, social anxiety. All of these things kind of impact our engagement with imposter syndrome. But I think one of the driving forces that we have been trying to communicate here is that it all looks different and unique for each individual, especially as we begin to define what competency looks like for us, what informs our perspective of competency. We recognize that imposter syndrome is just going to manifest itself and look different for each and every one of us. So there's some reflection questions to kind of interact with as well as you're navigating through this negative thinking, self-doubt, maybe even self-sabotage sometimes.
Wow.
That kind of comes about with imposter syndrome.
Wow.
Come on, people.
Wow.
We are not ready.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, after Gay Lisa has just dropped bombs on us, we will leave you guys with that. Hopefully these reflection questions are helpful in you identifying these places in yourself. And we hope that you'll continue with us on the journey as we navigate what this looks like and how we're able to use this for our benefit. Have a great one, guys. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.